So, Chrissy, so excited to chat with you. You have a new book out, When I Talk to God, I Talk About You. It drops February 14th. And this is a kid's book, which I find fascinating. What made you want to write this?
Well, Bradley and I wrote it together, and we were just, we met during the pandemic, and you really get to know people when you have a lot of time to talk. It wasn't that we had our jobs to go to necessarily, and we were just sequestered here in Nashville. And we just started talking about, things that mattered to us and how we grew up and how we were raised. And it was just sort of, I don't know, an evolution of our conversation of um, how important it is to really guide and protect and love and foster children as we had wanted to when we were kids, and also because they are the future, and how important it is to impart something that was helpful to us in our lives, to impart that to them, hopefully at a young age that they can grow and implement into their lives. And prayer for me was very important, and it was something that was really cultivated with my relationship with my grandmother. So it was just sort of this natural evolution of a conversation that we had. And so we were just excited. I've always wanted to write a children's book. I taught preschool, and I have a very big family. I have 9 nieces and nephews. So Bradley and I just got to writing it. We did two different versions.
Two different versions, yeah.
Something was much more broader concept and more whimsical. And so we kept just bringing it down to, the foundation of really the conversation that you would have with your higher power. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was really sort of the inspiration of writing it together.
I love that. And Bradley, this is a book that deals again, and you were just saying this, Chrissy, but a parent's, prayer for his or her child, which is such an important part of parenthood. We're constantly praying for our kids and, hoping for the best for them. What for you, in your life, what role for you has prayer played?
Well, the book for me came from my grandfather was very sick when I was young, about the same age that this book is for. And I remember seeing my mom being really stressed, my family being really stressed, my grandmother not doing well. And I was struggling with can I pray or not for them? Or can I pray for his health? Can I pray? What can I pray for? And this book, even through writing it, helped me answer a lot of those questions, that a child can pray for anything that they're going through. They can pray for their friends. They can pray for their teachers. They can pray for their pets. And it's trauma doesn't have an age. It's not unfortunately exclusive to as we get older. But to me, learning to pray at an early age really helped me get through a lot of these traumas and problems that we all face.
Yeah, I mean, prayer is such an important and powerful thing. And there are big questions we all have, whether we're kids or adults, about, why we don't always get the prayer that we ask for, right? We may pray for something, we may pray for a loved one to get better, and they might not, and so that's such a broader theological conversation. But the knowledge that God hears us, right? He hears our prayers, even if the situation turns out differently than we might have wanted it to. So Chrissy, when you look at this book, and you look at the impact of it when a parent picks this up, reads it with their kid, or a grandparent with their grandkids, what are you hoping they take away from it?
Oh, I hope that there's just a conversation between the child and the mentor, the parent, the grandparent. Even if the kid has heard the word prayer and might have said, a good night prayer, but really to have a conversation and a connective tissue between the older parent or mentor and the child, because I know that it can seem very overwhelming and intimidating when you're like, wait, how do I pray to something I can't necessarily see, but I can feel, or we talk about whether, you call it God or a higher power. I hope that it just resonates with people enough to bring up conversation that might be difficult to have, and it sort of simplifies it and makes it really relatable in the book. And also just to have an awareness of the ability to have a conversation and a relationship with God. For me, that was really important and has really been so beneficial for me in my life. in so many ways because I mean we all have our own journeys, but mine were my journeys were very, very interesting. And I prayed for things and didn't get them at particular times, and it wasn't the right time. And I had to completely surrender and trust to that process. So I'm hoping that the book will create just conversations around maybe an idea or a concept that we don't always talk about and you don't always bring up at the dinner table, but maybe at bedtime or, when you're driving your kid home from school and they're like, hey, I wanted to pray last night and, whatever it could be. I mean, it's definitely being brought up in my house with my nieces and nephews. So I think that it will translate in that way for others. And I hope it does.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in your story, which I think is an incredible story, I would imagine prayer was at many different twists and turns throughout that. I know you've talked about this a lot, but when you booked This Is Us, having less than $1 in your bank account, right? Being sort of in this tough position. Talk about that a little bit, just how prayer has maybe sustained you in the midst of some of those difficult times where you're thinking, okay, what's going to come next, God? What am I going to do here? I'm a little lost. I'm not sure where to go.
Yeah. I mean, 12 years in Los Angeles thinking that, I would have had success sooner than the stint that I had. And before This Is Us happened, 2 weeks before I booked the job, I was ready to move back to Florida and I just didn't know what to do, but I would just pray that like thy will, not mine, be done. Because for me, I always say that like my ego and my time is not God's time. And so there were, I think, a lot of lessons that I needed to learn or things that I needed to see and experience myself in order to be ready for what was coming my way. And I don't think at 21, when I moved to LA, I would be able to handle that at all. So that for me is when I pray and then I realize, oh, I put my prayer practice into practice and I was able to surrender and trust, then hindsight, I could look back and say, oh, yeah, it didn't happen then because I wouldn't be able to handle myself or I wouldn't know how to talk to people on the carpet if I wasn't an agent for 9 years and I wouldn't know the questions to ask. And so, yeah, in all of those ways, it's reiterated to me that, oh, yeah, there's a bigger picture and a bigger plan. And that's definitely what we talk about in the book, that we think we know what we want or we need in our lives, but if you can surrender and trust to the bigger picture and to what God has in store, for me, it's a very soothing balm to know that, like, okay, it might not be in my time, but it's going to be God's will and God's time, and that for me always just helped tremendously. And it's hard to do. It's hard to put into practice every single day when you want something or you feel like you need something or you're missing something in your life. Um, yeah, so it's definitely a practice.
Yeah,
It,
no,
the
and I was just going to say, when I think through and I finally gotten to this point of being able to say, okay, God, you know what? It may be that this person isn't going to be healed or this thing that I want to happen isn't going to happen. I'm going to ask you for what I want, but I want it to be in your will. And then understanding that there is that bigger plan and being comfortable with that. I mean, that's a big part of faith that took me more than 30 years, most of my life to try to figure that out. Like, how do I get comfortable with that? I don't know if you want to speak to that at all, Bradley, but that's always been a struggle, but I've gotten to a place where I can do that now.
Well, sure. I mean, I feel like we're always tested, right? And we're always, there's things that are put in our lives that we don't view as blessings at the time, but looking back, they really are. I remember I was sitting on my couch during quarantine, thinking I'm totally scared, I'm totally worried. What am I going to do? And then I realized a lot of what I had been through had prepared me to become a songwriter, and that's what I'm pursuing now. And any fear, anything that I had that felt that I was doing the wrong thing has completely gone away now that I've found that path. And this book has been a big part of that. A lot of it has healed wounds. I know for Chrissy and I both, as far as wondering if we have been doing the right thing, and hopefully,
Yeah,
it keeps going.
and inner child stuff as well. That this concept of inner child, you're like, what is this? And relatively new as far as I think most people understand. And I realized that in writing this book and in this process that it's so important to instill all of these really beautiful concepts to children at a young age, and things that I wanted to hear or needed to hear, or just affirm, that yes, God's rejection is our protection. Like those things are huge concepts to understand until you see it in the moment. Like you're
Yeah.
saying, when things that we've dreamt for didn't happen, and you know, I just know because my life doesn't make sense on paper that someone greater, bigger, and more amazing than I have a handle on it.
Right. And the book is a very gentle introduction to prayer.
Yeah.
It's illustrated. Our illustrator is incredible. Lisa Fields, just amazing. But it's with animals. So it's very easy for, adults, children to see the stories of animals taking care of each other and praying for each other and apply it to their own lives.
Yeah, it's very inclusive. We didn't
Yeah.
want to have it. I think people can relate to animals, and they're cuddly and cozy, and also nature also was created by God, and so all of those things are very intentional, and why we chose to do what we
Yeah.
did as far as illustrations in the book.
Well, I love that because these are things that kids relate to. And look, people today are struggling. The pandemic didn't help. People were struggling before the pandemic, but you have a lot of people looking for purpose and meaning, and they've lost connection maybe to a higher power. They're not being told about God. So a book like this, reintroducing those things to young people who in particular need that guidance today, is powerful. And again, the title of the book is When I Talk to God, I Talk About You. Chrissy, how did you guys come up with that title?
Well, we got to work with Margaret, who works in Flamingo, which is an imprint of Penguin House, and she did all the Fancy Nancy books, and she's just a wonderful publisher. And she sort of kicked the idea around because it's obviously in the phrases of the book, but we wanted something that was like a touchstone. And she, excuse me, I think we said something about like, when I talk to God, and she's like, I talk about you, so it was sort of this kind of,
Collaborative
yeah, collaborative,
brainstorm.
idea, but we had the idea of what we wanted it to, say, but she really sort of honed in and finessed the actual title.
And it
But
took us a long time to simplify the
yeah,
message, really
Yeah.
hone it in towards children, which is what we've worked on.
yeah, I mean, basically we all know, or I believe that if we're here on this earth, we're purposeful. We don't always know what our purpose is, but having that said to a child that might be 4 to 8 years old is really hard. So you have to just continue to like simplify and simplify. And that's what we did with the title too. And something that would resonate with people. And also, I mean, what's more special than for someone to say, when I talk to God, I talk about you. That's, I think, the most loving thing that you could do for someone. So
Absolutely. And believing that, as a parent, that those prayers are going to be heard, that your kids are going to be blessed. And I just love that you have dove into this topic. Chrissy, one last career question for you, because it's interesting. This Is Us was a huge, massive hit. The show has concluded and you're doing these amazing projects now. What for you sort of dictates whether or not you will say yes or no to a movie? I mean, you did Breakthrough, or a TV show. What is it that sort of guides you toward a role?
for me, it's how does this impact my, actual soul, my spirit, my the way that I walk through the world? Is it going to leave somebody um, educated? Is it going to leave them joyful? Is it going to leave them inspired? And is it going to leave me inspired? And for me, I want to be a part of projects that either challenge me and or scare me, in that like, okay, I don't know if I can handle this, but also what is it like, what's my thumbprint that I'm leaving on the world and whoever watches the movie or, indulges in the show. So it's really about, does it make me happy? Does it challenge me? And is it going to be a positive thing and in the world, and in a way that, sometimes things aren't unnecessary, like they're not necessarily positive as far as the story goes, but they can impart empathy, and they can show somebody another walk of life, and hopefully understand that as different as we all are, we're all really the same. So there's sort of a big criteria, but it's also a gut feeling too, for better, for worse sometimes. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, I appreciate both of you taking the time today. Everybody watching or listening, the book is When I Talk to God, I Talk About You. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank
you, Billy.
you.
Thank you for having us.